Right, so actually, we started off the last two sessions just by asking what, where everyone was in terms of getting a site set up. So does anybody who already has a website? So nobody has a website. All right, cool. So how many people are thinking about getting a site set up where they can post things and their news articles?
Okay.
Is that everybody or some people?
About half.
How many people are just thinking about it? Like maybe it was easy enough.
And the other thing I wanted to know was, do you consider yourself to have journalism DNA? In other words, you've always wanted to be a reporter or a publisher, or are you setting up a news site or a website because you're an activist? So we'll kind of do it. If you do you think you're sort of a journalist at heart and you want to set up a news site as a journalist?
Sure.
So one, and are you doing it because you're an activist? Okay.
Well,
All right.
I don't know, my answer's somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
I was doing citizen journalism in addition to my, job for almost a year, but this is so pertinent because it became unsustainable. I was an unpaid citizen journalist that, took it pretty far, and there are simply so many hours in the day.
Right.
I lost it. I kind of lost it, so I'm trying to
So
get it back.
either you want to make it into a business and make some money out of it, or you've had it.
No, I mean, here and there when I just feel, about the DNA thing, that
Yeah.
there's something, unreported news in my local community is the thing that drives me. There's, a plethora of unreported
Oh, okay.
news. I jump in there sporadically.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. That helps. Okay. So I think you got who I was at the opening, so I'll just let Ken read it.
Okay, right. So I'm Kenny, the co-founder of Broad Street. Broad Street is an advertising company, and you'd be thinking like, why are you here? And the reason is because Broad Street actually spun out of Red Bank Green. And if anyone's from the Monmouth County area, if you're familiar with Red Bank Green, anybody? All right, Red Bank Green is one of the earliest hyperlocal websites actually having influenced by BaristaNet. And Red Bank Green is they report there was a big coverage gap in Red Bank. John Ward, the publisher.
The town of Red Bank.
Right, and Red Bank's about 15 minutes away, and it was a town where there was a lot of unreported news, like you were saying, and John Ward decided that he was going to start Red Bank Green. That was going to be, the community news site. He was going to build a business out of it, and that's what he did. So that's what John Ward does full time. He used to work for Star Ledger. I think he did stints at Asbury Park Press and a few other places, but that's what he does full time for the last, I think, since 2006. So he's kind of grown this idea of unreported community news into a business, and if you go to redbankgreen.com, you can see a lot of the businesses advertising on the site. Anyway, back to Broad Street. Broad Street spun out of Red Bank Green. I've been very close to the New Jersey news community since then. I've been trying to help out with helping other people get set up with their own community websites.
Okay, so this was, talking about the commitment about being a publisher, and this is sort of a heavy step because, again, you may have to balance how are you making money. In my case, when I decided to start BaristaNet, I had been a freelancer for many years. My husband works for the AP, the biggest news organization in the world. I was getting health benefits through him, and my father was an entrepreneurial journalist. So to me, it made sense. It didn't seem like that big a risk, but it is daunting because especially the first time I accepted an ad, and the ad was like for 12 months, and I was like, oh my God. I am telling them that I'm going to be in business in July and still publishing. This is a weighty undertaking a business that I've undertaken. Partner or not, big issue. A lot of people start any kind of business with a partner, and it can be a great thing, and it can be it can backfire as well. The one warning that I'll give about that is that. Often your partner and you may start at the same place. So my main business partner at BaristaNet didn't come from the entrepreneurial background I had, and didn't have this kind of safety net I had in terms of family of origin and her husband. And so she jumped at a full-time job pretty early. And that meant we had it for, this happens a lot in partnerships where somebody works harder than the other one. I mean, it could be a flower business, it could be a bakery.
It's hard to get it perfect.
It's hard to get it
really hard.
It's hard to get it perfect, right? So I think if I were doing something again, I would want to be the owner of the company. company. I would want, that is not to say that I wouldn't necessarily give equity to somebody and wouldn't want somebody to bounce ideas off of. Alternatively, Kenny and John have a great partnership. My father had a great partnership. It often works out, but it's something to think about very, very seriously, especially if you did, as I did, a 50-50 partnership where everything has to be decided by both people and there's no easy, way of doing the math. For-profit or non-profit, as I've told the two other groups, if you're talking about hyper-local for a town, and you're successful and and everything's going right, you can get revenue of about $200,000 a year. We know a lot of people who've done that. But that doesn't mean it's automatic or easy, and that everybody gets that. That means that you're publishing, you've attracted an audience, you've got somebody selling ads, it's all working well, and it usually helps if you're starting in an affluent community to begin with. Nonprofit can be a really good way to go as well. I know that in Connecticut, where Yale is, I'm losing the name of the...
New Haven.
New Haven, thank you. New Haven Independent started, it was very inspired by BaristaNet. And he started as a nonprofit, and see him on panels for years thereafter, and had a bigger budget. He was able to hire people at salaries and give them benefits, and he was able to do that because one, he got some foundation money, but instead of having to sell ads in units of $250 at a time or $500 at a time, he would go to a community foundation or a hospital and say, support this good, solid journalism for the year, give me $10,000 or give me $50,000. And so he felt like he was making fewer calls that way. So it's something to look into, but I would say don't go after the 501c3 at first because it's expensive and time consuming. Find a foundation that can be your fiscal agent, which you can do. So you can be a nonprofit without having to go through the legal steps of becoming a 501c3. Hyperlocal or niche, hyperlocal, everybody I think these days knows what that is. It's like my town just lost its patch, or my town just has a weekly newspaper, has nothing. But you can set up niche sites that are on subjects, on some kind of, we had New Jersey Arts News was in here earlier. There's a site in New Jersey called, that's one of our partners called New Jersey Tech Weekly, and she just covers the high-tech scene. So you can think about niches, and certainly you've got Sandy people here who might have niches. Publishing schedule, again, if you're doing a hyper-local, you are basically giving up your weekends and your into infinity. I can tell you numerous cases where I was lying down on my sofa on a Friday night, and
Here it comes.
And here it comes. There was a shooting at a carnival. I need to go out and cover the carnival shooting. If you're a niche site, less likely, right? My father covered food safety, and there were not that many food safety emergencies, like that. So you have to think about what you're committing to here and structuring it. Also, just knowing some basics. A lot of people, especially kids, will start out by saying, wow, they figure out how to take pictures off of somebody's site, pull them onto their top, and then top of their desktop, and then put them onto their site. That's not legal. You can't just take pictures because you can, because physically you figured out how to do it. You have to take pictures that are copyright free. The best way to do that is to take them from Wikipedia or Creative Commons, Flickr Creative Commons, or government websites. Pointer Online Media Law class, I love this class. The Media Bloggers Association set up libel insurance, and they made all the bloggers take this class before they would even be eligible for buying the libel insurance. It's free. Just search this in Google. Sign up for Pointer. It takes you about an hour and a half, and then in the end you take a test, and it will not only teach you about libel, but about copyright and privacy law as a result for publishing. And particularly if you are going to set up a site and you're going to have people working for you, like freelancers and other people. I used to make everybody at BaristaNet take this class. With publishing comes responsibility, and if you don't come from journalism, study up on it. you know, go to conferences, read about it. You know, there's a lot on the web about the basics of journalism. JLab has done things about online media ethics. If you're not trained in journalism, either professionally or in school, study it, because, you know, if you're going into this space, you're becoming a publisher. So, okay.
So to talk about some of the technical stuff, a lot of you are looking to actually, you know, set up that bullhorn online somewhere, a place to live where you put your posts up, you have your pictures, and there are a few different ways to do that. But the point is that you're kind of dependent on technology as an online publisher. That's half of, you know, your entire business depends on the technology side of it. So most publishers kind of wing the technical stuff starting off. So if you talk to, you know, I'm sure Debra will tell you, or you talk to John Ward at Red Bank Green, just kind of learned as they went. But some of those things, some of those, the lessons along that path can, you can absorb those up front and kind of make some different decisions that might help you out in the long term. Where you should get your site set up, the kind of things that you might worry about when you're getting the site set up. So if you make the right choices early on, you're kind of save yourself some headaches in the long term. And a lot of what we're going to go over, it's not something that you have to remember like right now. It's not things that you have to take note of, but these slides will definitely be important if you end up moving forward, because we're going to talk about things like ad sizes, the kind of designs that you want to look for, hiring developers, and the kind of rates that they have. So it's kind of something you probably do want to refer to in the future. So, getting a website. How many people are familiar with WordPress? Okay. So WordPress, if you're not familiar, is basically a publishing platform. It is a software that sits on a computer. It could really be, it's really a computer out in the internet somewhere. So when you go to NewYorkTimes.com, that site is sitting on a server, and their site is running software that lets them post pictures and all that stuff. WordPress is free, open source software that you use to actually post, you know, pretty much the same thing. Most, you know, Bristol, Red Bank Green, most local news publishers in New Jersey use a software called WordPress. So you might be thinking, how can I get set up with WordPress if I want it? You basically need a host. So I said that WordPress runs on a computer. It's usually called a host or a server. And there's usually hosting companies that'll host WordPress for you. And if you really want the easiest route is to go with a company called WP Engine, which I'm a big fan of. There are other hosting companies like A Small Orange, that publishers like Crystal Map in New Jersey, Dylan Smith, who's the head of an organization called Lion, kind of a guild of local news publishers, he uses A Small Orange. But the point is that you want to find a host, you want to go to one of these sites, and usually they'll let you register a domain name right there. So Red Bank Green, at one point in time, had to go register redbankgreen.com. Then they had to go find a host, and they set up, you know, basically told their host, I want WordPress set up, and had that domain pointed at that new host. So the separation, and we've kind of gone over this a few different times in the last session. I'm not sure we've done it 100% successfully yet, but WordPress is software, and the server is kind of the platform or the hardware that you actually run that software on. That might actually be a little too technical, so maybe somebody who's not
or
there.
that distributes it or gets it out into the world. Maybe.
Right.
So, I mean, if you've ever, a lot of people have gone on to WordPress.com and started a site right there, which you can do, and which you can do in about 5 minutes, and you can set up your site. And it will be hosted on WordPress.com, and it will be free. And you can do that to start out, but pretty quickly you're going to want to migrate to this separate hosting. You want to separate those functions of WordPress into the hosting and into the content management platform. And the reason is, if you're doing something that's professional. If you're just doing a personal blog that you're never expecting to make money on, you could just stay at WordPress.com. But if you want to use plugins, if you want to use a lot of HTML and be able to have some flexibility, to put maps in, so maybe we went to the mapping thing, you're going to want to use when you separate that, you're getting to the professional level of WordPress. And it's not that much, it's like $24 a month to use WP Engine, but if you're, you know, it will in the end save you a lot of steps down the line and give you much flexibility. We have something at the Engine Use Commons called the Story Exchange, where you sign up for Repost Us. And if you want to, and it allows people to embed each other's stories. And you can't embed somebody else's story on a regular WordPress.com site. You need it to have it on a hosted site. somewhere. And similar, there's just a lot of plugins and things that won't work or won't work as well unless you have separated those two things. So even if you don't completely 100% understand this now, if you look at host, if you Google it and play around with it, it'll start to become clear to you. We just want to make people aware that there's two ways of doing WordPress.
Right, and if you just want to kind of say, I don't really want to think about the technical stuff too much, if you go to WP Engine or a Small Orange or any other site, the things that you really want to think about, which don't matter right now, don't matter to you right now, but in the future they probably will. One is that you want automated backups. So if you're in business for a while, you've been publishing, you have that years worth of stories under your belt, maybe 5 years. Maybe one day there's a site failure, or for whatever reason there's data loss, and you didn't have any backup. So all those posts, all those pictures that you took, all that hard work, missing. And whatever host you have, usually they do backups too, but you just want to make sure they do automated backups, because if they don't, you kind of have that risk if something does go wrong. Hack protection, WP Engine itself has an insurance policy, so if your site gets hacked, they'll take care of it for you. It's included in the cost. And then reliability and support. So WP Engine, very reliable. Small Orange, very reliable. And like I said, no affiliation with these companies. It's just that having worked with so many bad hosts, there are only 2 hosts that I actually like in the end. And a Small Orange and WP Engine are those hosts. The other part is support. So if something goes down, if your site goes down, if you're having trouble, a lot of times you want someone who can treat you like an actual customer, as opposed to feeling like one of the herd every time they're having an issue with the service and you're trying to figure out what's going on through some chat box. A Small Orange and WP Engine has some of the best support I've ever seen, where they get back in an hour, they tell you what's going on. They get a lot of times they'll jump into your account and help you out. So that's a big plus. So why would you want WordPress? We've heard about WordPress, we're obviously pushing it pretty hard, but WordPress is 25% of the internet. That means there are so many WordPress developers, there are so many people who know WordPress, so if you had a question, how do I do this in WordPress, you could ask John Ward at Red Bank Green, or you could ask almost anybody. You could post it on Quora.com or StackOverflow.com, which are basically question and answer sites, and someone will get back to you almost instantly. Because WordPress is so widespread, so heavily used, there's so many people that know WordPress. And most importantly, if you end up going forward, at some point you'll want a developer to help you out, who can help you customize your site. It's so much easier to find WordPress developers, and they're so much less expensive than developers for other platforms. It's also the easiest to upgrade. So as new versions of WordPress come out, it's usually a one-click upgrade. The easiest to customize. So if you want to install that Repost Us plugin, that's something. It's really there's a plugins link. You click that. You type in Repost Us. If there's admittedly there's an install button. You install it, and you've just installed. You've extended the functionality of WordPress. And there are thousands and thousands of plugins you can use to install things like YouTube videos or Vine videos. Every new service that comes out, there's probably a plugin for it. And anytime there's something that you really want to do and you're not sure if WordPress does that out of the box, there's a good chance there's a WordPress plugin that already does it. So you kind of get that extensibility. And most important, actually, also very important, the themes. So as you launch a new site, you want your site to look good. You want it to have some, we'll talk about some of the things you want to look for in a theme, but there are different looks and feels, different styles that you can have on your WordPress site.
And they generally look good if you're going with a theme. They're designed by some kind of designer somewhere, so they're attractive to start with, rather than don't try to build a new site from scratch.
Right, and there's so many times where I'll ask somebody like, oh, what platform are you on? And they'll say one of the few different things that'll completely crush me on the inside. One of them is, oh, I'm on Joomla. I'm like, no, why would you do that? And Joomla's a competitor to WordPress, awful code base, don't want to use it. Or they'll say, oh, we had a developer, he made it from the ground up. It's like, no, you'll never find another developer who knows that platform.
Yeah.
Exactly. Every developer from that point on is going to come take a look and just back out. Because nothing to do with that site. So WordPress just, it's so many people use it, so many developers use it. It's such a great choice. So hopefully they're convinced at this point. But if you still want to go Joomla, I can at least make some good recommendations. Getting a developer, you can go it alone. You don't need a developer. A lot of you think like, oh, well, I have to hire somebody now. But a lot of times a developer is really just a trusty sidekick that for $200-300, they can set you up. You don't have to go through that whole site registration process. You can say, I want this domain. Make sure you get the ownership of the domain. I want it set up on this web host, and you know, I want this logo there, I want it to look like this. And a lot of times, a developer will they can get it set up in probably, you know, 1, 2, maybe 3 hours. If someone came to me and they said, I need this much done, shouldn't take me longer than 3 hours just to get a site set up overnight. They will also help you customize and most importantly put out fires, because as you grow up and you have more stories and some of your stories start getting viral, a fire is basically when your site goes down, all right? And then you get up, you know, it might actually, John Ward, Red Bank Green, 5 a.m. he gets up and basically starts sending me emails at 5 a.m. But you know, the thing is, I wake up and if there's a problem, I'll go and figure it out right then. So a developer should be, you know, your sidekick, help you, you know, in those emergency situations, and also help you just customize the site. The average WordPress developer costs anywhere between 30 and 60 an hour. Most of them are freelancers, so they might have a full-time job and be doing this on the side. If you get a developer, and Debbie was talking about her first developer at BaristaNet, Jen Schiffer, awesome developer, was actually outside the lower bound of this range, and that's so rare. So if you get someone that says, oh yeah, I'll do it for $15 an hour, it's like kind of be wary, because it's almost a little too cheap. It's like someone saying they'll put a new roof on your house for $1,000. It's like, it sounds great, but there's something wrong.
I would say also that I would say if you're, and here's where it's different if you are doing it as an activist and as a community organizer, or you're doing it as a business. If you're doing it as a community organizer, you know, maybe you don't need a developer. But if you're doing it as a publisher and you're becoming a business, I'd say you do need a developer, and particularly in the beginning. You know, and I didn't even know that developers were called developers. I'd say, this is my website expert. This is my tech person. I didn't even know for years that they were called developers. And you know, over the years, I gained a lot of confidence in a lot of things. At the beginning, I knew none of it. And you know, you are going to want to learn and be as confident as possible, understand how to put HTML code. You don't want to have to lean on your developer for everything, but to have somebody who knows how the internet works at that deep level is really, really important, especially if you're you know, like planning to be a business and you're hoping to at least scale in your own community to something significant. I think, you know, finding a developer is well worth your time and money.
And with John Ward, and you know, I've always helped out John Ward, who's a publisher of Red Bank Green with the site. A lot of times it's just question and answer. So he'll say, how do I do this in WordPress? And I'll reply, and it'll take me 2 seconds. It's like, it's not like I build a guide for that. Developers shouldn't be billing for that kind of question and answer stuff unless it's really expensive. But usually he is the WordPress expert and help you here today. And like I said, 30 to 60 an hour is usually the ballpark range. And I'd say 35 or 40 is probably not a, usually most things in WordPress don't take that long, so it's not like every bill is going to be like $400. It should really only be like 40, this took me an hour, this took me 2 hours. It shouldn't rack up that fast. And always, if you actually do end up talking to the developer and say, how many hours do you think this will take ahead of time? Get an idea of how much it will cost, and then you can kind of back out. And that's been something with, you know, just being very candid. John Ward will say, hey, can we do this? I'll be like, yeah, it's going to take like 10 hours. And you'll be like, wait just a second. You know, like, let's think about that in 2 days.
Yeah, right.
So it's a good idea to get an idea of your costs ahead of time. So getting the design, a lot of free templates for WordPress. The big thing you want to look for is ad ready. So 300 by 250 size ads. 300 pixels by 250 pixels, which is a unit of measurement on computer screens. This is a standard size ad, and there are different standard size ads that you'll want to run in the future, but the reason I've stressed this so much is that most news publishers end up with these really wacky size ads and eventually want to move to the standard size ads. So it's when if you get out and you make your first ad sale and you want to run that person's ad on your site, maybe they're having a designer put the ad together, maybe you're putting it together in Microsoft Paint or Photoshop if you're pretty savvy. You want it to be that right size ad, and when you look for a template, you want a template that supports those size ads. Usually ads go in the sidebar, so you just want to look for a decent size width on the sidebar. And you also want the site to be responsive. So how many times have you gone to a website in your iPhone or Android and it looks awful? That's because the site's not responsive. And as more and more sites, as they're getting redesigns, are being responsive, where when you load it in that iPhone, it doesn't naturally look really nice. All the ads get pushed over into the correct column, so everything just looks. You don't need a mobile application. And every time someone says, "Oh, Kenny, I'm thinking about getting a mobile app for my news site," and I say, stop right there, just get a new design, get a responsive design, and you'll be taken care of. You don't want two things to have to manage. You don't want to have to manage a website and a mobile app. So that's really what you want to look for in design. Developers, I think I already talked about this endlessly, but news publishers, if you talk to most news publishers and say, hey, who's your developer? They say, I don't have one, I haven't had one in a year, he ran away. For whatever reason, that just seems to be so common in this industry. So usually you want to find a developer at a good rate, and like I said, they should be your trusty sidekick in emergencies, but you should also kind of give them a little breathing room where you say like, okay, I need this feature, can you get it done in about a week? Instead of, where I've had clients in the past when I did a lot of freelancing, who would say, hey, I need this feature, can I have it in like 2 hours? Well, like, what do you think I'm doing? I have other clients and, I just can't be that responsive, it's crazy. So usually you just want to be, understand they have other clients. And that's, obviously I'm a developer, so I have things to say about that. And we already talked about the rates. A developer, very quickly, if they have an account on github.com, that's a great sign. And that's from a software developer. So that's one of those things where most of them probably won't, but if you find out, you do a little research, every time the developer reaches out to you and you're thinking about hiring them, Google their name, see if they have a LinkedIn, see if they have a github.com. If they have this, that's awesome, and it's usually a sure shot. If they've spoken at conferences, that's amazing, but chances are their rate is a lot higher than the other developers. And also just ask, as a little interview question, be like, so if I asked you to develop a feature on my site, would you do that on a live site, or how would you do that? What you want them to say is that they'll do it on a test site first, because there are some crazy cowboy developers who shoot from the hip and would gladly just jump in and start writing code on the production site or the live site. So you don't want that. That's crazy. You want them to do it in kind of a staging area first before they do it on the live site.
Okay. So, so getting an audience, when I started BaristaNet, there wasn't social media yet. There wasn't Facebook, there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't Pinterest, there wasn't even YouTube. Obviously now you have all these tools, and Facebook is a great way, to get people knowing your site and get people, basically advocates for you and posting your links. But you can also use the physical world to spread the word. And so when we first started out, we spent money on t-shirts. The t-shirts didn't go to the public because they're kind of expensive. You can't get a t-shirt for less than $15 generally. So they went to volunteers. And then volunteers gave out things like balloons and postcards and things like that. But we launched in the summer and went to every carnival and festival that we could possibly go to and talk to people about it. So don't and then also the other thing is, if you are thinking about a hyperlocal, we printed these postcards, the standard postcard size that had a cute image on the front. And sometimes, like when you're trying to sell an ad, and you don't have any traffic in the beginning, and they're not going to buy an ad. But then you'll say, hey, well, thank you very much for considering it. Would you mind putting these stack of 100 postcards in your store? They're like, sure, that's free. They're happy to do that. So again, using the physical world. How many of you got to see Justin Osceola in a previous session from Jersey Shore Hurricane News? So you learn how he really got viral with Facebook. It's a great example. And then if you do become a publisher, reach out to us at the News Commons to list you as a partner, and we have this thing called the Story Exchange, where it's a platform called Repost Us that you can sign up for that allows other people to use your content. And you might say, well, why would I paid for this content? Why would I give it away for free, which is essentially what you're doing? The reason is because you're trying to grow an audience. Number two, you can send an ad with it. And number three, you get the analytics. So if I do a story and it's posted on NJ.com, which is the 900-pound gorilla of New Jersey publishing, I will get like anywhere from 2,000 to 6,000 hits usually in a day of it being posted on their site. And that's really, really helpful at the beginning.
Right. I've known a few different publishers who were a little skeptical of reposts at first. Like you said, it's like, why should I give my content away? But
right.
That traffic flow is so intense on NewJersey.com that when your stuff does get posted, it just pours onto your site, and all of a sudden you gain, so many new potential readers. They might like you on Facebook, and all of a sudden you're being pushed into their social stream every day. So it's really beneficial for getting that initial audience. So this probably should have been prior to that slide, but we talked about the standard ad sizes before. this is what you kind of want to look for in that theme, is just look for places, okay, could I put a 728 by 90? That's one of those long banner ads that you see at the top. So you might have an advertiser who has one of those. I think in terms of ads, I think a lot of times, sometimes you have an advertiser who already has their own ads, maybe they have an agency. More often than not, I think that either you had an agency that you kind of shuffled that task out to, or you end up creating the ad yourself. But usually, if they do have an agency or they already have an ad on hand, it's in one of these sizes. So that's the other benefit of having a theme that has ad-ready slots. Oops, did I hear the start of the question?
When we're designing for the mobile apps or the mobile apps, how does it differ? When we're developing, so are we developing two different advertisements?
No, actually, well, some of it, I mean, that's going to be a little more sophisticated than you want. It's going to be a little more of a headache because usually if you have like a 300 by 250 box just like this, when that site gets responsive and is pushed into that iPhone width view, usually this guy gets shuffled beneath the content. So usually anything in the sidebar just looks naturally very nice. This is not so easy. So once you're in that iPhone width right here, this thing has to get crunched down. You can barely read the text. So that's why starting out, your first ad ever will probably be one of these guys. And that's why I totally suggested you should get one of these.
So this is for a one-time, this is the cost, the revenue.
Right. So the point of this slide is to basically help you plan out. When you have your website or you're drawing out your website, it's an idea to plan out how you're going to generate money with it. How much should this cost when you're first starting out? That's always a question that I get. People say, well, I don't sell any ads yet. My traffic is, but I want to sell an ad. Like how should I price it? A lot of times just ballpark it. I think starting out, John Ward said, it's $100 for this slot right here. And over time, that price crept up. So
Right.
Sure.
And the other thing too, and I guess you're going to get into the ad serving later, but is, when you first start out, and especially when a lot of us first started out 9 years ago, you just say, okay, we sold an ad, great, and that would go up here, first thing. And then you'd sell another ad, and we didn't know how to, it didn't even occur to us that ads could be rotated, and you might have more than one, and then you finally get down, and you'd have 5 of them, and then they'd say, wait, you can't see it when you go to the page, you have to scroll down, I don't like that. And eventually we learned, but we were new to it, and the whole industry was kind of new, that you had these things called ad servers, which allows you to say, okay, this is a zone. This is essentially what this is now, a zone, an ad zone. And this might be your most expensive ad zone, or usually the one up at the top would be. But, the first biggest ad on the right, and each zone you would price differently in terms of, so for Aristonet, we would sell the ad up at the top of the page would be now, fully valued at like $1,600 a month, and up to three ads rotating through a $1,600 a month thing. When we first started out, it would have been $250, dedicated things. So that's what we're talking about here is, you start to look at different ad zones and think, oh, I could have this split 3 ways. And so what the ad server, what Kenny does, and we'll get to the next slide, is he basically makes it randomized and automatic so that if you have 3 people or 2 people splitting an ad zone, they're going to get 50% of the impressions. But then you have to train the advertiser. They may not see it every single time.
Right. So, this slide in particular, when you're looking at your site or looking at any website, it's a great idea to just mentally break it up into ad zones. So you say, okay, I want a big ad up here. I usually say just start with these guys starting out. You say, okay, this one should cost this much money, or this is how much money it's going to bring in. I'm going to rotate, when I say SOV, I mean share of voice, 50% share of voice. So that means each advertiser is going to get 50% of the display time in this slot. So if I load the page once, I'm going to see one advertiser, and if I load the page a second time, 50% chance I'm going to see the second advertiser. So you have 2 advertisers sharing a slot. So it's a good idea to just plan this stuff out ahead of time, because you don't want to set your ads up in a way where your ultimate revenue is limited just because you set your ads up in a certain way. You want to be able to think long term and say, okay, I can reach a maximum of I think maybe it adds up to a little over 100,000 here.
But ultimately you can play with it, and there are certain sweet spots, and you sort of learn them over time. So in Aristonet, we basically had ads ranging, so an inside page might be for us the food page or the real estate page. It's not necessarily going on the front. And it might be, the cheapest ad might be $100 a month, and I told you that the most expensive ad might be $1,600 a month. And you'd have ads at every place there. So maybe if you went back to that slide here, this one is I don't know if you get the price, $300 a month, $750 a month. So this one is almost as good as the other ad, but it's cheaper. And you know, you just start to the ad. Has a great commission-only ad salesperson, and she's the supply and demand test all the time. And she'd say, okay, now I can only sell 3 spots into that top ad, and everybody wants it. You know, so we'd have to figure it out. Okay, supply and demand, then we're going to raise the price of that. And then I can't sell this ad down here to save my life, so we got to lower the price of it. So you can, you know, but then if you sold somebody for a whole year, which is kind of good, then your grandfather them into that. You're stuck with that. So you have to make these decisions all the time. You learn as you go along.
Right. And these numbers in green, this is like your yearly intake for that particular slot.
If it was 100% sold.
Yeah, if it was 100% sold. But the point is just to basically give yourself enough breathing room that you could get to that point if you really wanted to. And this could just be the front page, like you're saying. If you click on, you know, kids, for example, maybe there's different ads in this slot, and that opens up a whole new section of advertisers, you know, Gymboree or, you know, any of those other places that might cater to moms, that type. So you can break it up by section too. Ad managers, like you're saying before, you don't want to get into that situation where you're, okay, like first advertisement, second advertisement, where, you know, you want something that will ultimately help you manage your ads. So you sell an advertisement to say, okay, usually I guess you sell it on different month terms, like 3-month term, 6-month term, maybe a year. You know, they might have a campaign date and say, okay, I want to start it on the 1st of January. I want it to run until June 1st. All right, then you really want an ad manager that is going to help you run that ad and automatically disable it, you know, by the time that campaign's up. It'll also do things like rotating ads. So different advertisers get different share of voice. And this is all stuff that probably might not even be relevant for the first 6 months, maybe a year that you're getting set up, but eventually you will want an ad manager. Also serves ads efficiently, which isn't a huge problem for you right now, but long term, once you start getting a lot of traffic, if you have an inefficient ad server, it starts to slow your site down. And that's kind of a pain point that a lot of people who use BroadStreet come to us about. And it also gives you room to expand. So as you start breaking out ads between different sections of your site and selling them in different places, it tends to be really helpful. So tips and tricks, this is stuff also that, you know, maybe you care about when you're starting out. You have Facebook comments. WordPress comes with its own comment system built in, but we found that Facebook comments, at least on Red Bank Green, are a really big win because not only are they easy to drop in, but they tend to pull people back into the story. So someone makes a comment, someone else comments on their comment, then it shows up to that person who first commented as a notification inside Facebook. They click into it and it pulls you back and drives your page views up. So Discuss is an alternative, just like Facebook comments. You probably used it before and not necessarily knowing what it was. And another little trick that we do is at Red Bank Green, at the end of every story there's a Facebook like, or like Red Bank Green on Facebook, because a big part of growing your audience is also having a Facebook page and letting people like your page on Facebook, because every time you push a new story, let's just say the 1,000 people who like you on Facebook, you're pushing that story into their social intake. So, you know, they're scrolling through on their iPhone when they should be doing something else, and they read your story and they click into it. That's getting right in front of them and pushing those you know, those stories right in front of them. And also, don't let your developer hack the theme. All right, so if they make modifications to your theme, you want them to create a child theme. So that's another good interview question if you're talking to a developer. Just say, if you were going to make a change to my site and the layout, how would you do that? Would you create a child theme, or would you modify the existing theme? Because if you modify the existing theme, if there's a theme update, some fix, you can't update the theme because it's already been modified to do whatever you paid your developer to do. So moving forward, you can register a domain name. I think Gandhi.net is a great place to register a name if you want that domain name. If you want something like redbankgreen.com, Gandhi.net is a great place to go. And find that post. I mentioned WP Engine, the small orange is really good. If you want any other recommendations, you can talk to other publishers in New Jersey, or you can just ask me.
So, can GoDaddy.com is something similar to GoDaddy.com.
I'm not a huge fan of GoDaddy, but if you're already registered on GoDaddy, that's totally fine.
It's the same thing, it's the same.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
it's a registrar.
What's wrong with GoDaddy? Because I use it too.
My problem with GoDaddy is that they try and upsell you on every
Oh.
step of the way, and they're also their control panel is infuriating for developers.
Oh.
Just because it's so blotchy and stuff in your face, trying to sell you on stuff, and I've had a bunch of issues with GoDaddy. So I've used GoDaddy in the past. Red Bank Green uses GoDaddy, but if you're already on GoDaddy, go for it. But I'm a huge fan of Gandhi.
So in the long run, be a Tom Sawyer, get people excited about what you're doing at the beginning until you're making money. A lot of people are willing to help you for free, especially if you're building something cool. Find peers for support both through the Citizens Campaign, through the News Commons, through Lion, which is the local indie online news. You meet other people. And now there are just tons of them in New Jersey, and you can also find someone who's at your stage of development, who is going to have similar problems to you, and you start talking to them about everything and really helping each other out. It can be everything from recording questions to how much do you pay someone to do the art, do you charge your client to make an ad, or do you give it away for free? All these kinds of questions, constantly having people to bounce those questions off are good. And beware of burnout. I've known a lot of people who've been doing this over the years. Our model was to keep hiring people, at least paying freelancers for things, as opposed to one. And other people will have one guy, the creator, the originator of the site, doing everything because they don't want to spend any money. They want to get all the money themselves. I was able to write 3 novels and get them published and go to an artist colony and go on vacations, I mean, to me, so to me, I think it's worth it to if you start getting revenue, you have to start getting, it's a chicken and egg thing, but I think if you can start getting revenue, then to pay people to do things. And that's the other thing. If you're successful, you have to keep doing, the audience, even though the audience is generally not paying a thing, they get more and more demanding. And so, a few years in, we were paying people to monitor the comments and make sure that the calendar, approve things for the calendar, things that we hadn't even imagined that we would need at the beginning, because it becomes a well-oiled machine. And
Eventually, you become like an institution in town.
You do.
And on Red Bank Green, for example, John Ward will post a story and people say, should this really be in the news, John? Is this newsworthy? It started out as his own site, but now he's a thing, and people kind of view him as an authoritative source.
Right.
So if you guys need advice, I always make myself available, kenny@broadstreetads.com, and I'm always happy to give that kind of advice. But there's also a community of publishers in New Jersey. It is the tightest, most densely packed community of news publishers in New Jersey. So if you're starting out, it's the right place to be. But if you have any questions, because there's so much stuff that we threw at you over the first few slides,
and I have my business card here as well, and I'm happy to do it. And reach out to the News Commons, because once you get to that point where you're becoming a publisher, we want to know about you and we want to support you in a lot of different ways. Okay.
Thank you.